The Forerunners battled a war against the parasitic flood across the entire Milky Way galaxy for hundreds of years. After exhausting every possible solution to the flood, they saw there was nothing they could do to win the war. They decided to eradicate all life in the galaxy and leave humanity as the reclaimers of the mantle of responsibility. This choice alone was what saved humanity from extinction. But today, we explore how humanity could have been spared in a different way. Today we explore what if humanity had joined the Covenant. The way I imagine this would go down begins in 2525, roughly 12 light years away from Harvest. In the debris field left behind by a human vessel destroyed by the Kig-Yar, the bird creatures contact the Covenant to let them know they had found Forerunner technology, but another species had it. The Luminary had detected the symbol of reclamation, but it was now gone with the ship. Seen as the symbol is of great importance to the Covenant cause, the prophets at the time sent Maccabeus to meet with the humans. Though first official contact with humanity turned into a bloody affair, this is where the shift in the timeline takes place. After the conflict breaks out and Maccabeus, Tartarus, and the rest of their forces have a chance to regroup and repair their ship, the Rapid Conversion, they use the onboard luminary to discover what a grave mistake they're making. The symbols of reclamation have dwindled during their fight, and they can piece it together quickly. Though the brutes aren't the smartest race in the galaxy, it is clear to see the new species, humans, have something to do with the Forerunner symbols. Armed with this knowledge, they head back to High Charity before escalating their conflict on Harvest anymore. When Maccabeus informs the heads of state about their discovery, the entire council is shocked and aghast. The prophets believe that humanity is the key left behind by the Forerunners to activate their ancient technologies. Still cautious as to not lose their control over the Covenant, the prophets are not eager to claim humanity as their reclaimers. Instead, they label them as the tools of reclamation. Internally, the plan is to use the humans to gain access to Forerunner technologies, yet unable to be accessed. Relics that have been stockpiled for thousands of years of hunting. The prophets do awaken a sour personality within the center of High Charity, however. As we know, this is mendicant bias, at least a fragment of him. The events play out very much the same. He mocks the prophets for believing the symbol was reclamation and not reclaimers. He plans to head off to Earth, where he will bring humanity to the Ark to ascend to their rightful place as the Forerunner's chosen people. Just in the nick of time, the Legolog worms inside the device manage to turn it off, and the journey that could have been ends. But this does make the prophets wonder, if even the mere mention of humans awoke the dreadnought in the center of High Charity, what can they achieve if they make humans captive and prisoners? Enslave them like they did the Envoy and force them to use their ability to activate Forerunner relics. Through clever lies and manipulations, they convince the elites and the rest of the middling races of the Covenant that humans have special connection to the Forerunners, something akin to their pets, because clearly the Forerunners ascended to godhood and left them behind to grow and possibly join them in the great journey one day. They explain the symbol of reclamation as it being reclaim the human race, and they serve as the key to start the great journey. With this in mind, the Covenant gather a tremendous fleet of over 100 ships and set out for Harvest. Unfortunately, at this point, after first contact had gone so awry, humanity had gathered the UNSC and sent one of the biggest fleets ever assembled to wait for the return of the alien conglomerate. The Covenant returned to Harvest in the middle of 2525 while still working on decoding the last bits of human language. The mere arrival of many ships is seen as an act of aggression by humanity, and one mistake leads to another. As President Cole declares an attack on the fleet of discovered exaltation, the Covenant had come to talk, but after thousands of years of the same routine, discovering a new species, waging war with them, and subduing them to their side, they were prepared for the humans' attack. Preston Cole's fleet is woefully outmatched as he commands dozens of battle groups to their deaths. Ship after ship falls, clearly proving humanity is no match for the Covenant. It's only on the ground where they're having any remote success, with the Spartans holding off Covenant forces from staging a base on world. The battle rages for less than a day before Admiral receives a message from the fleet master in charge of this campaign. It is to tell them to surrender. They have lost over 100 human ships, and with only a few dozen left, while the Covenant has only lost a handful. If they surrender, they will be spared, and allowed to make recompense for their transgressions. They will be spared a fate worse than death, and their real punishment can begin. If they don't accept peace, they will be entirely annihilated. The Vice Admiral listens to the words, but refuses to take them to heart. He will not cower against a stronger opponent. He continues his battle until he sees 10 battle cruisers form up from the back of the Covenant line and makes a straight run for the planet. easily breaking through the UNSC blockade. The massive cruisers line up all around the planet on the most populated centers of the fledgling colony and begin what can only be described as the opening of Hell's Gates. A blue stream of hot plasma spews from the belly of each cruiser, shooting down onto the surface, quickly and ruthlessly burning and churning. The atmosphere around boils away, the ground turns to glass, and the magnetic poles begin to weaken, cracking the planet's magnetic shielding like an egg. Millions die in seconds. President Cole has no choice but to surrender. Knowing humanity would not stand a chance against this, his ship is boarded and he's taken as a prisoner to a Covenant supercarrier alongside hundreds of others. The Covenant demand an audience with the leaders of the UNSC, and although highly reluctant, the remaining officers agreed to contact Earth to bring the decision makers to the outer colonies. Humanity can come with a fleet to try and take Harvest back, but the Covenant assures them that will seal their fate and damn them to extinction. A month and a half later, after a few human ships had arrived on Earth and Reach to tell them how horrible the battle went, the UNSC sends a delegation to speak on behalf of the entire race. They will meet the aliens' demands if reasonable, in order to be allowed to exist. After all, they've had a month to decipher where major colonies are, go through shipboard AIs, and take the knowledge they want and need. In the meantime, the Spartans have been keeping a low profile on Harvest. Those who survived are still humanity's greatest assets. On High Charity, Cole and some of his lieutenants are being kept as prisoners and forced to activate countless Forerunner relics. The Prophets see this as a win. Humans will be treated as engineers and be kept on ships, kind of enslaved and bred like cattle or ungoi. They'll be the newest race to join the Covenant, but they will start at the bottom. With this in mind, the meeting between Covenant and human leaders sees humanity being offered a place in the Covenant, that or extermination. The UNSC refuses to after seeing the terms of their joining basically enslaves their entire race. They invoke a sacred ritual of the Covenant, honor through combat. The Covenant leaders laugh and mock them, saying the trial was their first battle and how poorly they fared against them, but humans rub off on the elites saying that if they had honor, they would accept the challenge. The comment on their honor had struck a nerve, and humanity would be allowed to prove their worth with one caveat. The warrior chosen to represent the Covenant would be newly introduced Arbiter of the Covenant, Ripa Morami. The Prophets had made it clear issuing the challenge was not in humanity's favor. Because of their insolence, they would suffer the wrath of 7 races of the Covenant Empire if they lost this challenge, which the Prophets 100% believed they would. The human delegation would be eaten alive, and the rest of humanity would be slaves in no kind words. Just flat out endangered servants. Lower than grunts, lower than the food the grunts eat. The humans went all quiet with fear. It wasn't until a single captain emerged from the ranks and presented forward humanity's champion. A slow pair of heavy steps clanking on the smooth surfaces of the Covenant ship they were on board of echoed throughout. A figure standing just over 7 feet tall, shrouded in green armor from head to toe, with a golden visor reflecting the Arbiter's swords off of it. He walked slowly and deliberately, standing across from the Arbiter. A demon. They had expected a puny little human with a barbaric, outdated weapon to step up, but instead they were faced with the Master Chief. Decades before his career would become a legend across the galaxy, to both friend and foe, a 14-year-old boy. The fight between the Arbiter and the human demon began. The blocking of the assault rifle bullets with the duality of his swords, the slicing and prodding at the heavy robot-like armor that was Mjolnir. It all culminated in a beautifully choreographed battle that lasted less than a minute. But by the end, the greatest warrior in the Covenant laid motionless at the feet of the human. The onlookers were stunned, the Prophets angered, the demon still in his place, ready to take on any newcomers. This was how humanity had earned the elite's respect. The Prophets had done this to themselves. Allowing the challenge to go forward meant humanity was given a rightful place along the species. Much like the brutes, they would not be at the top, but they would not be near the bottom like the mindless grunts and savage jackals. After which, the prisoner known as President Cole was released to humanity's custody. He was returned shirtless with burns on his chest, a clear display of dishonor but with penance, and so began a decade-long relationship with the Covenant. After 10 years of being part of the Covenant super empire, humanity had cemented its place in the Covenant military. There's a human on board every single Covenant ship in case artifacts of their gods are to be found. The role of being a Marine has taken a back seat Instead of being combatants, they have become more closely regarded to the Yanmei. They aren't immediately sent out to war, but when the ship master commands them, they must listen. In return, there is various races on board human ships as well. While the integration of Covenant technology has not been miraculously fast, it has sped up the UNSC's capability significantly. It's not to say that conflicts between Covenant species and humans don't happen. Most notably, brutes aren't allowed on human ships due to past incidents where they go on rampages and both eat and kill their human victims. Similar occasions have been observed with jackals and grunts. Elites view being placed on a human ship as dishonorable. Most of them at least. Grunt decons are more common, as well as the use of hunter worms to aid the tight repairs on board. Though it's been a decade, humanity only has access to 3 engineers under extreme vigilance. 1 on Reach, 1 on Earth, and 1 on Meridian. Shifting focus aside, the Covenant-Human Alliance has allowed the Covenant primarily to find and activate hundreds of ancient artifacts left behind, the most notable cases being the clues left on Harvest to the shipyard of Forerunner dreadnoughts, which the Covenant would have possession of if it wasn't for there being flood on the shield world they found it on. The infestation had once more gotten out of hand, and although they weren't busy fighting one another, the flood was still able to force them to blow up the shield world to stop the spread of the infestation. This decision marked the shame and dishonor of a particular elite shipmaster, Thelvadam. He was branded and burnt, making him a new arbiter, one with much shame and much more left to prove. He would lead a campaign against the rebellious humans called the Insurrectionists and remove them off-worlds with Forerunner technology. On the other side of the spectrum, Spartan IIs were placed on highly important Covenant ships such as the Shadow of Intent and the Long Night of Solace. They were akin to zealot teams in charge of retrieving relics to the Covenant cause. They were the equivalent of having 30 arbiters running around the galaxy. Some humans had begun to live on high charity, much like the species from across the Covenant, but this has mainly been a religious faction that believes the Forerunners are gods, much like the true Covenant Testament. It is one of the places of holy pilgrimage. However, high charity stays far, far away from Earth. After what the mendicant bias AI exposed to the prophets, they fear they could lose control of all their power if it were to reawaken to take its place on Earth. They want to know more about what's going on down there, but are content with a slow excavation of the ruins of New Mombasa. They certainly noticed how unhappy the humans were when they were forced to evacuate and tear down dozens of cities on Earth and Reach and many other colonies. One more major side effect of the Covenant hunting down the insurrection was the creation of the Spartan 3 program. The UNSC had not gone all in on the fate of humanity when joining the Covenant. They kept one place off record and off the books, Onyx. This would house the brightest minds humanity had to offer, and this time, one in particular was included in the fold. Catherine Halsey was in charge of once again brainwashing a bunch of kids into believing the UNSC's secret agenda. These kids were orphaned by the Covenant, taught that the Covenant had enslaved humanity, and they were being raised to be a new line of Spartans that would free humanity from all their grasp. Of course, they knew they may never need to use these Spartans if the Covenant kept their promises, but people like Admiral Perengoski and Catherine Halsey knew better than to expect the prophets to keep their promises. Eventually, they would have a use for the Spartan 3s, they just didn't know how or when yet. Would they assassinate the prophets on high charity and attempt a coup to place humanity at the top of the food chain? No one could say just yet. After a decade of coming through all Forerunner finds, the Covenant had pinned down a single location of importance. Something they found on Sigma Octanus 4 coupled with information from the human world of Reach. Something that vindicated their great journey. The discovery of a single halo. The portal that would awaken a rift that would commence the great journey. Or something similar. Humanity hadn't really believed the great journey. From everything they were told, there was massive holes in the story being told. But other alien races had been so culturally and deeply integrated that they didn't even realize how easy the lies were to see. They decided to send in a steady and capable set of warriors, but also scientists, with the expedition to the Halo. Mostly out of obligation considering they were needed to activate every other piece of Forerunner tech ever. The demons were not sent, they were held back on purpose, as the Covenant leaders knew how powerful they were, and on the cusp of obtaining their holy immortality, they didn't want to risk a betrayal from the humans. The most important people on the expedition were on board High Charity. All 3 prophets and thousands of Covenant ships. On the ships, humans such as Preston Cole, Sergeant Major Avery Johnson, Dr. Glassman, Sarah Osman, and a full battalion of ODSC spread out through a dozen ships. From the Senhili, the most important one was Lord Saitan Watinri. While the prophets had desperately tried to keep him away from this, He'd gotten word about findings of the sacred ring and had recalled his fleet to High Charity. On the brute side is another story altogether. Tartarus and, believe it or not, Atriox would be on board the brute ships. Without the constant onslaught of Atriox's people, the Banished have never formed here. Not yet, anyway. But what's more important is the secret fleet of brutes from Unyielding Hierophant has also been dispatched. It's not a fleet of 500 ships like it was in the original timeline, since it's nearly 2 decades earlier, but at this time, it still has just over 100 ships. Not much in the grand scheme of things, but Truth had set them up with a purpose. Since Zaitan Watinri had commanded a large chunk of elite ships, the brutes would be able to ambush unsuspecting elite troops and take them out, replacing the elites as the Prophet's chosen protectors. And so the party of over 1,000 ships take a slip space jump to the location of Installation 04. The arrival to Halo proved a puzzling conundrum for Guilty Spark. Reclaimers were here, but with them a myriad of other races. Somewhere in his deep forgotten and blocked out memories, he remembered humanity had aligned themselves with the Shanshayun millennia ago, thinking this may have happened again after the firing of the rings. Perhaps it was in both the species' natures to seek out one another, but more confusingly, a lot of other species had come to this installation. Races he certainly knew his masters had not left behind as the Reclaimers. He had prepped all the installation's defenses against the arriving party, but chose not to fight, as the forces of the Covenant outnumbered and outgunned him. Well, outgunned him as far as not activating the galactic genocidal machine. The Covenant had swarmed the ring, while human scientists were used to find the location of the silent cartographer, and by extension, the control room. It didn't take long to do either, and immediately the Prophets and their honor guard headed to the control room. However, while the Covenant was spread about the entire ring, they stumbled onto something. Something heinous. Something monstrous. They encountered Captain Del Rio. The Flood. The Flood began to leak out from the research facility, and miraculously, there is but one survivor. A human soldier who found himself immune to the Flood. He was taken to the library by Guilty Spark to retrieve the index, while the Covenant begins to deal with the Flood. The Prophets use this excuse to claim that the elites betrayed the Great Journey by opening up the seal to the research facility, and the Great Schism begins to rumble out from within the Holy Relic. The Imperial Admiral Zaitan Watinri is no pushover, however, and Tartarus and his brutes don't stand a chance against him and his elites. He defeats Tartarus and even the monstrous would-be banished leader Atriox. At this point, he is far less experienced and younger, and doesn't have the strength nor knowledge to defeat Zaitan. Meanwhile, Johnson has an extremely difficult time trying to reach the index, but manages to get it only by mere chance, as the battle broke out across the entire ring. A Covenant light corvette comes crashing into the library. They crashed it into the Holy Relic only as a last resort. The elites who control the ship were already fighting the brute ships when the Flood intervened, and rather than letting the parasite spread throughout the galaxy with a slip space drive, they kamikazed into the library. The survivors don't have any reason to help Johnson, but it is in their best interest when they hear the Oracle, Guilty Spark, tell them they need the index, or as they begin calling it, the Sacred Icon, to activate Halo's true power. The elites immediately jump to the opportunity to start the Great Journey. They aren't worried about the Flood or the humans or the Prophets ascending to godhood like them, because in their eyes, only those with honor would walk the path to the Great Journey, and after their betrayal, the Prophets and brutes certainly would not be chosen by Halo. After fighting alongside Johnson, the elites have a much higher respect for humanity, seeing they are strong and honorable, even if they are vermin. They manage to get the index and exit the library, so Guilty Spark can teleport them back to the control room. When they arrive, the whole place is filled with dead bodies, and Zaitan's forces are holding off the brutes and traitors. Zaitan is surprised to see how any human has made it after how brutal the war outside is going. He thinks the battle could be won by now if he was out there commanding the fleet, as he is both a blade master and a master tactician, but he is a true believer of the Great Journey. He refuses to give up control of Halo's control room. The Oracle pleads with them to activate Halo so the infestation can be eradicated before it spreads to the rest of the galaxy, and Zaitan indeed wants to do so. But before he agrees to, Johnson starts talking to the monitor, asking how Halo's defenses will take care of the Flood if everything else they have thrown at it has failed. Spark tells the truth of the ring. I will wipe out all of the Flood's food source, and that's when Johnson stops. He realizes they are the food source. Through all this, however, the battle against the brutes had died down. That's because outside, the Flood had overran the brutes and made their way to the control room to stop the firing of the ring. The Flood do break into the control room and start immediately taking the bodies of all the dead around. quickly outnumbering the Imperials and Healy's forces. Zaitan takes Johnson by the neck and starts tossing him around, trying to force him to activate the ring. He doesn't believe the ring would kill them all, but instead they will ascend to godhood and be able to eradicate the flood that way. Johnson continues to refuse, saying he would rather die, and looks out to the entire rest of the control room to see that the flood is capable of something much worse than death, weighing the options of letting this happen to everyone or killing the entire galaxy. Guilty Spark tells him there is no time. His installation can only reach 25,000 light years on its own if the other rings don't fire, and considering the flood are already inside the control room, he'll have to activate Halo without its full strength and only do a short-range pulse to at least wipe out the local infestation. Johnson relents. This is his best option. He doesn't know how short range, and thinks about how many colonies are going to be wiped off with a single pulse. How many billions will be blinked out of existence? He shakes his head, all beat up and bloody from both battles with the flood and Zaitan tossing him around, and inserts the index onto the console. The hologram in the center of the room spins up and powers up, lighting the whole room as it prepares to fire. Johnson sits down and takes a cigarette out of his pocket, while Zaitan and his elites let out a deep roar for the great journey to commence. One of the elites that had walked the path with Johnson through the library activates his sword and stands by Johnson as he sits there dying from his injuries. Johnson points to the elite's sword. He raises it, and Avery touches the tip of his cigar to the sword, igniting it. He takes a deep, long puff and brings out his magnum, firing into the crowd of Flood. Zaitan cutting down Flood by the dozen with each swing atop a mountain of biomass. He screams a loud roar of victory as a silent boom echoes throughout the control room, and everything goes to white. The ring fires. A wave of energy washes out from it, encasing every possible direction. The battle on and above the ring no longer mattered. All Flood, human, elites, brutes, Sanshayum, and so on around the ring doing battle are wiped out in an instant. The wave pulses through thousands of planets, hundreds of which have occupants still in it, from humans to elites and all in between. All halos go on standby, and on Earth, a beacon activates, as well as on Onyx. The firing of one of the halos sent the rest into standby mode. What's worse, the Covenant Empire begins to collapse from the inside out. The battle between the brutes and elites leaves them weakened, extremely weakened on all sides really. The humans had a lot of colonies near Reach and Halo, so needless to say, Reach is one of the bigger tragedies humanity has to contend with. Everyone on Reach was wiped out. Humanity immediately pulls out of the Covenant, knowing it will mean war, but fully understanding whatever the Covenant did killed 100 colonies, including Reach. The aftermath of Halo's firing looks very similar to the end of Halo 3. A large chunk of the galaxy is flat out dead. Only difference is there is a lot of free ships out there, damaged or not, but they're empty. Some of the species of the Covenant refuse to believe what happened. They insist that those who died weren't worthy of the great journey. Some insist that the ring did start the holy salvation, but only took those who were worthy. The more rational parties of the universe know that's not the case, and the post-Halo firing galaxy looks a lot different. Humanity has a lot of their ships left as opposed to in the main timeline, but a lot of their people are dead as well, so they can't quite use them all. While the vast majority of the Covenant has broken up into 100 tiny different factions, ranging from believers to those who seek revenge on the Forerunners for creating such a weapon. The most notable pieces left on the board alive are Thelvadam and his followers, Avu Med Telkam, the Human Demons, and Spartan Threes, Onyx, Earth, Escharum, some who would create the Banished, and 100 more that are racing against the clock, both to find the shipyard that is now Halo and to cancel the standby mode they don't even know about on the other Halos. I left room in here to make another video, but this one was very exposition heavy. I hope you guys liked it. This is how I see the events of Halo going while still being interesting, instead of just wiping everyone out or them never activating Halo. If you guys really liked it, I can do a part 2, but it's up to you. Show me you like it by hitting the like button, comment where you think this story felt too off, and what you agree and disagree with. Take care, Reclaimers.